finished our series on the Ponevezher Rav. I was on vacation and I was cleaning up my computer desktop, and then I noticed some sheets I had pictured one time from a magazine about the Ponevezher Rav. I said, you know what, before you put them back in their place, you finish the series, okay, just check it out. I hadn't even remembered exactly what it was, and then when I looked it over, I realized, wow, this is just something I have to share, so we got to extend the series one more week, happily one more week. We're not necessarily going to see new ideas right now, but it's going to reflect so perfectly everything we've said and add some pepper and spice to it and some tom, but also being that everything we're about to say is from a first-hand observer, and literally giving over what he wrote about being a student in Ponevezher and what it was like being around the Ponevezher Rav, and because of his stature as a keen observer of Israeli society, I thought I had to share it, and we're going to share it in full. This is from Rav Moshe Grilak, who is, of course, the founding editor of Mishpacha magazine, the most popular weekly magazine in the Jewish world. And here's what he writes. Sure, we loved our Rosh Yeshiva, the Ponevezher Rav, but admittedly we thought his imagination had really overstretched this time. Who could believe that people of Ein Charod would seek their roots a generation later? So what sparked this article? An invitation appeared in my inbox about a week ago, which brought back a flood of memories. L'Shem Mitzvahs Matzah said the heading. L'Shem Mitzvahs Matzah, now it's to the season. The Ayelet HaShachar organization, which brings Torah and mitzvos to Israel's far-flung secular yeshuvim, were inviting me to the festive grand opening of a matzah bakery in Kibbutz Ein Charod. I happen to know that Moshe Grilak, besides his prowess as an editor and a writer, also is very much involved in the Kiruv movement, so it makes a lot of sense. The people of the kibbutz would be there, Barovam, said the invitation, along with the kasher supervisor of David Lau, the chief rabbi, would address, and the public was invited to take part of the Mayim Shalanu from the springs of Ein Charod at sunset. The first thought that filled my mind, Yemos HaMashiach. Readers who are familiar with the map of Israel know that Ein Charod is one of the many kibbutz in the Yisrael Valley, somewhere in the northern region of the country. But to the older generation, that's another reason, because we don't really know when we say stories about what it was as we've related over the series. But listen to what Ein Charod meant to him. The name Ein Charod brings up a host of unpleasant associations. To us, kibbutz Ein Charod is a symbol, is the archetype of institutionalized secularism, of militant heresy that sought to erase every trace of adherence to Torah mitzvahs in the early days of the state. And this is a very sound person. He's not a kanoi, he's not against anybody, but he's telling it how it is. This is the perception, because this is what it was. The founding members of Ein Charod envisioned an entirely new form of Jewish society in Eretz Yisrael, based on the ideals of communist socialism, and they confidently expected Torah observance to disappear within a generation. On Kibbutz Ein Charod, and every other kibbutz that followed its lead, I had totally forgotten this, Shabbos was an ordinary day like every other. Even the concept of Shabbat, as a day designated by Hashem's commandment, as a day of rest, was uprooted from their lexicon. Each kibbutz member was granted the right to choose a weekday day of rest. You get Sunday, you get Tuesday, you get Saturday, and that day was called his Shabbat. Although it may have been Tuesday or Thursday, even Yom Kippur was an ordinary workday. Yom Kippur and Pesach, baking bread, was a regular chore, and Pesach was no exception. And we have to emphasize, this wasn't, my friends, we have in America where people just don't know anything about Yiddishkeit. This was a philosophy, a concept, an idea. Secular Zionism at its very best, if you will. The secularism that reigned in Ein Charod was extreme and aggressive. And it was no wonder to us that the small minority at the time in Eretz Yisrael who held fast to Torah observance, Ein Charod was synonymous with total rebellion against Malchus HaShamayim. It was the epitome of evil and our bitter enemy. And we had written these kibbutzniks off as a tragic loss to the Jewish people. But perplexingly enough, our Rosh Yeshiva, Shlomo Kahanim and Zatzal, persisted in shining a spot of light over there. He was like a laser pointer that kept popping up on our dark field of vision. With dramatically flashing eyes, he would constantly proclaim, prepare tefillin for the people in kibbutz Ein Harod. He was absolutely convinced that this hopelessly lost population of heretics would one day, in the not-too-distant future, be eager for the privilege of laying tefillin. We boys admired the Rav, as we called him. We wanted to believe him. We certainly believed that he believed what he said. But it was difficult for us to see past the cruel reality that surrounded us. Heresy was spreading aggressively. Pride in secular Zionism, especially the socialist brand, was setting the tone in all areas of life. The Haredi sector, especially the shrunken yeshiva world, was an object of scorn and ridicule for the secular and even the religious Zionist population, who felt a sense of superiority and victory over us. There wasn't the faintest sign, not the faintest sign, on the horizon that the Rav's vision would come true. One summer, the Rav opened the first of the famous Yarchei Kala, learning retreats for working men. Today, we consider these programs as a normal part of life in Bnei Brak. But 60 years ago, the idea was absolutely revolutionary, with its regular Talmidim out on their Pesach break, etc. It was indeed an uplifting sight for us Bachram, who came to watch hundreds of men take over the hilltop where our yeshiva stood, ready to leave their business or labor behind and immerse themselves for 2 weeks in the purifying water of Torah. There was something fascinating about seeing our benches in the Beis Medrash occupied by storekeepers, clerks, bookkeepers, and teachers, their faces alight with Kedusha and excitement as they indulged in the rejuvenating bliss of Gemara learning. One day, we noticed a man who stood out among the others. His clothing and mannerisms were different. He looked like a secular kibbutznik, and of course we young boys were irrepressibly curious to know what he was doing there. A few of us sidled over to him and engaged him in conversation. He said he was from Ein Harod. We were stunned. A kibbutznik from Ein Harod, of all places, sitting in Yeshiva's Ponevezher in front of a Gemara? Could it be that we were seeing a bit of our Rav's vision unfolding before our eyes? We surely heard the footsteps of Mashiach pounding in our brains. The first one of us to recover said he's got to go in to see the Rav. With all the pomp and ceremony we could muster, we led him to Rav Kahneman's apartment. I don't remember all the details of what was said, but I'll never forget the Rav's palpable emotion. Here was Ein Harod had come to Ponevezher. This man, we soon learned, was the father of Meir Hartzion, who was one of the bold group of fighters in the special unit started by Arik Sharon to fight the Fedayeen terrorists who were infiltrating the fledgling state, and it was called 101, and whose battle strategies are studied in military schools around the world. Meir Hartzion was an object of admiration for Israeli youth in those days, even in Haredi circles. The state of Israel has gone through much development in its short history, and so it seems, as kibbutz Ein Harod. Under the guiding hand of Hashem, with encouragement of Ayelet Shachar, the kibbutz now has a daily kivasikim minyan. And today, as I write these lines, last-minute preparations are taking place for the gala opening of the kibbutz's matzah factory under Mohadrin Kashrus supervision. Even the kibbutz's head of education, who's secular, asked Ayelet Shachar director Rav Shlomo Ranan Shlita to allow 800 students from the regional school to come and see the baking. Not even their grandfathers knew what matzah is, she said. Their grandfathers didn't know what matzah is. It looks as though Rav Kahneman's vision wasn't so unrealistic after all. Okay, so I think everybody sees why that was something we had to share. And that just, sums up everything we spoke about the Ponevezher Rav. Yhi Zichra Baruch.